Chapter 3. What about karma? The Greek philosopher Zeno held that the most important aspect of the learning process is to unlearn our errors. In the study of prayer, we must unlearn the many errors that color our thinking about the prayer process. Like Jesus' disciples of old, most persons today are puzzled as to why, when they pray about something, nothing happens. Jesus answered their puzzlement by saying, "You ask and receive not, because you ask amiss." James chapter 4, verse 3. Since the turn of the 20th century, there has been a vast and growing interest among Americans in the religions of the East. This phenomenon is probably due to the failure of Western religions to fulfill the needs of their followers in terms of their spiritual quest. Much of the interest has been dictated by the passing fancy, the fad of the day, the in thing. Thus, a steady parade of gurus, perfect masters, and instruments of God has taken the country by storm. By this influence, there has been an infusion of many ideas of Hindu origin into the language of the Western truth seeker. Ideas such as meditation, self-realization, mantra, and a great emphasis on karma. The latter must be addressed and understood before we can become proficient in the science of prayer. Many persons have bought into the idea of karma wholesale, unaware of its implicit negatives or the vast and irreconcilable differences between karma and the law of causation as Jesus taught it, with its moderating concept of grace and love. The word karma is used widely through much of the literature in the New Thought field. Thus, most students have unthinkingly made it a part of their spiritual vocabulary. I think we need to take a good, long look at the word and possibly rethink the advisability of identifying with it in our personal practice of the truth. For some, this may be difficult, and you may be reluctant to let go of a concept that has colored your whole awareness of truth. To you, I say, consider this chapter with the same open mind that has characterized your journey in consciousness out of the bondage of orthodoxy into the new freedom in truth. There are 3 basic laws of Hinduism which are at the root of its various branches: the law of identification, the law of karma, the law of reincarnation. Admittedly, this is an oversimplification for the purposes of this basic comparison. The law of identification holds that each person is an eternal being, a soul, or Atman, who is on the pathway of unfoldment toward the ultimate merging into the soul of God. Every practice of the various religions of the East is directed toward realization of oneness with God. The law of karma, more than anything else, explains the Hindu outlook on life. The word is loosely translated as destiny or fate. You are what you are in respect to your fortune and your place in life because of your karma. Karma fixes the consequences of your acts. All mistakes, failures, and sins must be atoned for in some way at some time. They become a karmic debt that must ultimately, from lifetime to lifetime, be paid. In the Eastern belief, karma explains everything in one's world: suffering, blessing, sorrow, joy, pauper and prince, the pitifully sick and the radiantly healthy. Nothing one does is ever lost. Nothing is unaccounted for. Nothing is forgotten, discarded, or irrelevant. The law of reincarnation is to the Hindu a cosmic plan whereby the individual is in a continuous succession of births and rebirths through which it is possible to attain perfection in God. The soul at death merely seeks out another opportunity to live a life, to be born again to another parent. You might be thinking and considering these 3 laws of Hinduism, it's just like truth. It's precisely what I believe. Certainly, it does indicate the similarities of the teachings of the East and West. Religion is but a way of seeing truth. In the beginning, every religion was a sincere attempt to communicate a vision of truth to the world. It came as a wave washing at the shore of civilization. But as the wave has continued to break on the shore, It has brought the muddied backwash of form and ritual. If we push past the outward forms to the underlying truths, we find great similarities. On the surface, the concept of karma would appear to be the equivalent of the Western concept of the law of compensation of Jesus. Whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. Galatians 6, verse 7. The law of karma is simply a statement of a fundamental law of the universe. The universe is one of absolute integrity. So it is that one receives what one earns. One cannot receive less than one earns, nor can one receive more. Either would be an infraction of the law of perfect balance. It is probably true that everyone at times may feel sorry for themselves, believing that they are not receiving their just dues. They may cry out that something has been kept from them, that another person has taken their place, or that money or position has been unjustly snatched from them. But there is an inexorable law involved. And so we always set the tone, the standard of our tomorrows and the way we deal with the world today. This is a fundamental law, the law of sequence and consequence, or, if you will, the law of consciousness, or karma to the Hindu. When we understand the way mind works, we realize that to focus our thought on negatives, we use the creative power of thought in a negative way. We literally generate pools of negative energy that will have to be experienced in our lives. Most persons are completely unaware how very negative the tenor of their thoughts is, and how they are constantly laying traps for themselves, building up sequences in mind which will inexorably manifest themselves as consequences of experience. You see, the universe and everything in it is whole. Mind and body, consciousness and experience are completely interrelated. And the law of consciousness, or cause and effect, of karma, is inexorably involved. Every condition in your present life is a result of your consciousness. Your body, your weight, your health are all the outformation of consciousness. Your relationship, or the absence of a happy relationship, are the consequences of sequences of thought built up over your life. Your prosperity or lack of success is an exact reflection of the causal forces you have, however unconsciously, set in motion. Some would call this accumulation of karma. I prefer to call it consciousness. The intimation of this great law, identify it as you will, is that you cannot get something for nothing. You cannot break the law without paying the piper, and the good you do returns to you in some way with certainty. If everyone understood this law and lived by it, their lives would be transformed. There would be no hoping for good fortune, no playing the will of chance, lottery, numbers, roulette, horse races, and sporting events. In other words, we would see the folly of trying to bypass the great law that success is not getting there, but earning the right to be there. Of course, in our search for meaning, we all can see instances where there seems to be an injustice, where life seems unfair. Some people seem to break the law with impunity and get away with it. Some persons seem lucky or unlucky in everything: card playing, love making, and the pursuit of money. Look around you. Where is the justification for the misery and inequality in the world? How can you justify the millions of starving people, brutal wars, the victims of terrorist attacks and senseless crimes, the hungry and the homeless all around us? We are dealing with consciousness. And hard as it sometimes is to accept, there is no experiences unrelated to consciousness. It is like a bank balance where you have an accumulation of pluses or an overwhelming balance of minuses. And this is what is normally explained as an evidence of karma. I certainly do not accept the idea that karma explains everything, but in its cause and effect aspect, it is an important window into reality. The person who was involved in some accident or tragedy was in some way motivated to be there at that time. Of course, There are times when it is obvious that we cannot understand life in terms of the brief span beginning with birth and ending with death. Thus, the cosmic bank account must carry over from one life experience to another. This is why the idea of reincarnation seems credible. Personally, I find no sense of meaning in life without it. But now, having said all this, let us note the great and irreconcilable difference between the classic concept of karma and the truth of the law of compensation. The Eastern concept centers on our past and ultimate destiny. There is little hope or promise of freedom today. Karma becomes a cycle of penalty and retribution that continues on from one incarnation to the next. The person is, in effect, chained to a relentlessly moving will by the accumulated effects of the sins of past lives. Thus, each person is a weary treadmill traveler from birth to death and from death to birth. The resulting effect of the Hindu is a sense of hopelessness and futility. There is no healing, no way to overcome, no way out. Today's problems are part payment for past sins, and the karmic debt must be paid. Retribution must run its course. Now, we should say here that as with all religious philosophies, there are many variations of belief about karma, so it is dangerous to generalize. I'm referring to the classic and basic concept of karma. As we have said, many students of truth have bought into the concept of karma and have unwittingly accepted a lot of ideas that are irreconcilable with Jesus' teaching, thinking of karma as God's judgment, something that is going to see that we get punished for our sins. But I do not believe in a God or a karmic law that punishes, not even a cause and effect that punishes. You are punished, not for your sins, but by them. The great dynamic of Jesus' teaching is, you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. John 8, verse 32. You see, Jesus did accept the karmic law, but he taught that sequences and consequence, cause and effect, are law for matter and mind only, not for spirit. There is no law of retribution in God. For we are told, I have loved you with an everlasting love. Jeremiah 31, verse 3. We are loved unconditionally. God never stops loving us, but we stop loving ourselves. No matter what the causes of karmic debt, the effects can be dissolved by knowing the truth, by raising our consciousness above the level of sin. A good contemporary illustration would be flying out of the Earth's gravitational field into outer space, where weight is nullified. Many persons hooked on the idea of karma think that they are restricted by what they call my karma. It is a rationalization for a feeling of spiritual impotence, and to think this way is to cloud the issue of prayer with the incurability and impossibility that rise out of a sense that karma must run its course. People are often not aware of this, but it is implied when we make mistaken use of the idea of karma at all. The dynamic of prayer, often overlooked by Christians, is that when you enter into thine inner chamber and shut the door, Matthew 6, verse 6, you enter the realm of spiritual consciousness, where the higher law of spirit overrides or supersedes the lower law of the mental and physical realms. Thus, the new insight in truth reveals the way to freedom from karma. Retribution can be transcended. The cycle of karma can be broken. You can be free. All debts dissolved. You can be healed through the Christ indwelling. Paul says, for the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. John 1, verse 17. Let's look at this thing called grace.